Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a few moments as others join us. But in the meantime, please write in the chat box who you are and where you're joining us from. And please also take this time to select your language. To select a language, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and it will take you to the English or French channel. You can then choose to mute the original audio. You may also select if you'd like to read captions during today's session. To select if you'd like to read these captions, please click on the icon with the two C's at the bottom of the Zoom screen. To hide the captions later, please click on the same icon and click Hide Subtitle from the menu that appears. The captions are generated using an automatic feature in Zoom, so they may not be 100% accurate. On the Zoom platform at this time, captions are only available in English. We've also shared a few poll questions that we encourage you to respond to while we wait for others to join. If you'd like to read these in French, the French translation has been added to the chat. And you'll also see that the questions are in both English and French on this slide. The answer choices are in both English and French in the poll itself. So please take a few moments to respond to the poll questions, introduce yourselves in the chat, and select if you'd like to read captions during today's session, and please select your language at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you again for joining today. I want to welcome everyone again to today's session. My name is Brittany Getch, and I'm a program officer on the Knowledge Success Project at Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs. Knowledge Success is excited to be partnering with FP2030 on this series, and this is our 19th conversation in the Connecting Conversation series. If you've missed previous conversations, you can watch the recordings on FP2030's YouTube channel or read blog post recaps that include recording links on the Knowledge Success site and get up to speed. This conversation will last for approximately an hour, and we'll have an open Q&A discussion with our three speakers. It's being simultaneously interpreted into French, as I mentioned, and it's being recorded in both English and French. The recordings will be available in the coming days. If you haven't already done so, please select your language by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. It will take you to the English or French channel, and then you can select to mute the original audio. Everyone will need to select a language to be able to listen to all of our speakers. Just a reminder about closed captioning, you may also select whether or not you'd like to read captions during today's session. And to select these captions, please click on the icon with the two C's at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you wish to hide the captions later, please select the same icon again and select Hide Subtitle from the menu that appears. Participants are muted throughout the duration of this conversation, but if you have questions for our speakers, please type them in the chat box as you follow along. My Knowledge Success and FP2030 colleagues will be moderating the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as time allows. Just a little bit about this Connecting Conversations series in case you're joining us for the first time. Connecting Conversations is a series of discussions on adolescent and youth reproductive health hosted by FP2030 and Knowledge Success. The series has been divided into 5 themes, and we began with a look at a foundational understanding of adolescent development and health. We continued our conversations by exploring critical influencers and adolescent responsive services. Our 4th theme explored reaching key youth populations. For our final set of conversations, we'll take a look at some of the emerging trends and transformational approaches in AYSRH. We're excited to continue this final set with a discussion on implementing multi-sectoral approaches in AYSRH programming. Before I introduce the moderator for today's session, I'd like to start by reviewing the responses to the poll questions. So if we could bring those up. Great, thank you. The first question, when I think of multi-sectoral programming in AYSRH, I think of programming that pairs AYSRH with. And for this question, responses were able to select multiple answers. But it looks like the majority of you selected all of the above. So housing, finance, income generation activities, employment, environment, and housing. The second question, I've implemented a multi-sectoral approach in my work related to AYSRH before. The majority of you selected yes, that you have implemented a multi-sectoral approach in your work before. And for the third question, multi-sectoral programming is important to ensure all youth needs are met, including SRH needs. And overwhelmingly, the majority of you selected yes as well. Thank you for answering those poll questions. And now I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for today's session. Sia Nowrojee is the Senior Director of Global Community at Girl Up of the United Nations Foundation, a global leadership development organization transforming a generation of girls to be a force for gender equality and social change. Sia has over 25 years of experience working in international development and global health with a focus on gender equality and girls' and women's empowerment and reproductive health and rights and justice. Prior to joining Girl Up, Sia served as the executive director of the 3D program for girls and women, as a senior gender consultant with UNICEF, and as senior technical writer and editor with programs of the Aga Khan Development Network. Sia serves as the co-chair of the Learning Working Group of the Movement for Community-Led Development, and she is a 2020 fellow with Women Lift Health, a women's leadership program of the Center for Innovation in Global Health at Stanford University. A dual citizen of Kenya and the United States, Sia has a Master of Social Services and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Bryn Mawr College. Welcome, Sia. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Brittany. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you, with our distinguished set of speakers for this conversation, and with all of you I'm seeing from the chat, what is truly a global audience. So it's a pleasure to be here. And it is a pleasure to introduce our lineup of speakers for this conversation on multi-sectoral programming for adolescent and youth reproductive health. Our first speaker is Andrea Padilla, who is the program manager for the International Youth Foundation. And Andrea joined IYF in 2012 as part of the Youth Work Mexico program, which is a USAID funded initiative aimed to prevent crime and violence in Andrea's hometown of Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. At IYF, Andrea has worked on education, system change, and workforce development programs for both in and out of school youth. She has extensive experience working on different kinds of youth development topics and interventions, including youth-to-youth training, education, job placement, health, leadership, life skills, and technology, among others. Andrea has a master's degree in humanistic studies from the Monterey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. Welcome, Andrea. Our next speaker is Josaphat Mshighati, who is the Regional Technical Advisor for East and Southern Africa on Women's-Led Climate Resilience for Pathfinder International. Josaphat is a development management specialist with over 14 years of practical hands-on experience at every level of program policy and advocacy, from the global, regional, national to the local. Josaphat has coordinated programs across multiple sectors, including population health, environment, prevention of gender-based violence, women's access to and control of land resources, food security and nutrition, and women's access to maternal health and family planning, among many others. Josaphat holds a master's degree in development management and a bachelor's degree in political science, education, and teaching. And last but by no means least, I'm pleased to introduce Metsehate Ayenekulu, who is the Adolescent and Youth Sexual and Reproductive Health Program Director with Population Services International in Ethiopia. And at PSI in Ethiopia, Metsehate oversees, among many other programs, RISE, which is the roadmap to integrating Smart Start in Ethiopia. Metsehate leads a large and dynamic team in the design and implementation of a range of programs funded by a range of donors. She's demonstrated strong leadership in the design and scale-up processes of the Goalkeepers 2019 award-winning innovation, Smart Start, that serves 15 to 19-year-old married girls in rural Ethiopia. And being the child of a child bride herself, Metsehate's vision in life is to see the eradication of child marriage in her generation. Metsehate holds a master's degree on women and gender in development from ISS in the Netherlands. She's also an Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow in 2019 and is a passionate advocate, not surprisingly, for sexual and reproductive health rights, especially for young girls. Welcome to all three of you. It's a pleasure to be here to have a conversation about a big topic, multi-sectoral adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health programming, what works, what doesn't, and why it matters. As I said, it is a big topic, and when we talk about and think about multi-sectoral approaches to adolescent and youth programming, that can mean a lot of things to different people, and it can involve a lot of sectors. So I would love to hear from each of you, actually, what does, based on your own experience working across sectors, what does multi-sectoral programming mean to each of you? And I'd like to go in reverse order now, and Metsehate, if we could start with your answer.
Thank you so much, Sia, for that generous introduction. I hope everyone can hear me. As a person coming from PSI and currently working on a program called Adolescence 360, that resulted in the co-creation of Smart Start, I would like to tell you a story or our own journey while we were designing that program. Even if our program was envisioning to support the 15 to 19-year-old adolescent girls to get access to modern contraception, we didn't start from that topic when we were talking to the girls and the people around them. So to our surprise, what the girls told us is when we asked them about their dreams, their hopes,
Metsehate has frozen. I'm afraid let's give her a minute. And Andrea, maybe we could go to you to answer that very big question of what does multi-sectoral programming mean to you based on your, sorry. Metsehate, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear.
Okay, let's go back to you then. Please carry on.
Okay. So, for instance, the girls and the people around them clearly told us they really value education, but they don't consider it as a proven path for them to succeed in life, you know, because they see university graduates in their village and are not employed. They are not making a living. And at the same time, they told us the world is changing with this technology. They can't cope. The resource is getting meager and their environment is becoming fragile. That increases their vulnerability. And bringing all this together, our learning is whether your priority is SRH or education, unless you come up with a holistic integrated programming that involves a multi-sectoral approach, you are not going to help these young people. I mean, their situation is different, and they're calling even for a programming that considers them as a main actor rather than as a main user. So that multi-sectoral collaboration also calls for considering them as a key actors, as a main actors, as a decision makers in their life, as an expert of their own issues, rather than considering them as a mere beneficiaries. So for me, a multi-sectoral approach involves all this. And the moment I see the word, I still recall the voice of those girls calling for the entire development sector to design a program and implement by bringing them at the center rather than fencing ourselves in our respective sectors. Over to you, Sia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Metsehate, for reminding us that the users of our services should be at the center of them. And when we listen to them, we understand that we cannot work in silos because that's not the way that their lives are. So thank you for that reminder based on your very rich experience. Andrea, over to you. With your experience across so many different areas of youth development, what does multi-sectoral programming mean to you?
Thanks, Sia. Well, I'm honored to be here. As you can notice from my bio, I am no expert in sexual and reproductive health specifically. So my focus for the last 9 years has been in youth employability programming in Latin America specifically. And well, in my experience in this topic, I would say that multi-sectoral programming means two things. The first one is that we need to go outside our bubble. We need to collaborate with others, with other sectors and other stakeholders. And the second one is to apply a systems thinking and a holistic view of the situation. We need to identify the issue that we're working on with the population that we are working on, our role in the system around it, and who might be those other strategic players in that system. For example, I can share with you very briefly our experience in one specific program in Mexico that we implemented a couple of years ago. We were in Tijuana in northern Mexico to focus on job training for opportunity youth, a specific program called Orale. We have that program designed. It was a peer-to-peer approach to help young people to find employment or to continue their education. But what we found there is that they were telling us when we were first starting working with young people just in the employability program, we found that they were telling us stories about abusive relationships, early pregnancy, alcohol, drug abuse, and other risk behaviors. And so we ask ourselves that how can we be effective in the face of these serious challenges to be successful, to better help our young people. So this was in our area of expertise, and it was sure a definite factor that will negatively affect our goals. And so we found a local NGO, an expert in this area in sexual and reproductive health. And our decision was to integrate health screening and sex education into our employability training. We merged those topics, and because we knew that we needed to address the broader and complex set of challenges that were undermining our youth potential. And so that's how we started in this specific program, thinking about how we can apply a multi-sectoral approach and not only work with companies and employers to provide youth with work opportunities, but also we needed to attack this issue of sexual and reproductive health education and services, and specifically for our opportunity youth that were maybe not connected to education or to other systems around them.
Thank you, Andrea. I think it's such a good point that, you know, we may not be experts in everything, nobody is, but really through strategic partnerships, we can begin to address the range of issues that youth are bringing to us in a holistic and, as you say, through a systems thinking approach. Josaphat, you have worked across so many different sectors. So when you think of multi-sectoral programming, what comes to mind? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me start by saying that when we do a comprehensive analysis on the human needs, you definitely find that the human needs are connected to each other. And also when we talk about the issues facing the communities and community members, those challenges are also linked to each other. Now, in coming up with a solution, then you need to address things in a holistic manner. So allow me to share an example of programs that are being conducted by Pathfinder in the East African region through an approach called the Population, Health and Environment, or the PHE. So we work in the very remote areas, remote communities, where people mostly rely on the natural resources to satisfy their livelihood needs. In those areas, we have things like Lake Tanganyika, but also there is a protected natural resource, the Mahale National Park. Now, community members rely typically on their livelihood either on the lake, or if they don't get enough, they have to resort harvesting things in the protected areas. Now, conservation organizations have been fighting a lot, supporting the government, putting the bylaws, but destruction of the forest was continuing because human needs were not satisfied. Likewise, health organizations like Pathfinder, we say, okay, we are working in family planning, SUCCESS, but these are people who have their needs which are not satisfied. So we had to conduct a discussion with those communities in collaboration with the government, in collaboration with conservation organization, mainly the nature conservants, with the community members, discussing what are those main challenges that are facing them in that area. So we discovered there were a lot of challenges. There was a lot of girls dropping from school, boys also dropping from school to go to fish in order to get the money to feed themselves and their families. But we also learned there was a lot of early marriages, so the girls were not continuing in schools. We also learned a lot that family planning access services was also very limited because of the culture and the understanding. But we also learned that food security was an issue in that area. But we also learned that the effects of climate change significantly affected the fish catch. So people were having a lot of challenges. Now it was difficult just to say, okay, we are going to do services for AYSRH while people's needs are not addressed. So now coming together with conservation organizations, health organizations, the community members, the village authority, but also now bringing the different sectors, education sector, agriculture sector, the forestry sector, fisheries sector, to come up with a joint program that will address needs in a holistic manner. Now, that's the process we call multi-sectoral programming, to my understanding in my context. Over to you, Sia.
Thank you, Josaphat. And, you know, my a follow-up question I had for you, which you've already partially answered, is who are some of the key stakeholders that need to be involved in multi-sectoral programming? And you've mentioned particular sectors, but given that you've worked at the global level, at the national and regional and local level, where have you seen sort of the key entry points for bringing sectors together?
Yeah, in the Tanzania and the East Africa context, I think one of the key stakeholders that need to be brought into a play, those are the key beneficiaries, because they're the ones who can explain what are the challenges they are facing. They're the ones who can come up with a solution. They're the ones who can determine what they can do and where they need a support. Now, the other key stakeholder, that should be the government, because the government is supposed to deliver the services to the people. That's the main duty of the national government, the district government. So they need to own and to be part of that process. And then you bring them from the district level. In our context, at the district level, we have like a sector team, where you'll have people from health, you'll have the department for education, all the departments are there. That's the key entry point as we design the multi-sector program. And then you need to go a little bit higher to the national level, because that is where most of the decisions are being made. When it comes to budgetary allocation, when it comes to creation of budget votes for these activities, you need the Ministry of Finance, but you need the Ministry of Health, you need the Ministry of Natural Resources, you need the Ministry for Livestock, Women's Empowerment. They need to have a buy-in, so that when it comes to budget planning and when it comes to approving the budget, they need to be able to speak for that before the parliament. So those are the most key. And then sometimes because the government budget is not adequate enough, that is where then we need to say we need to look outside. Who can support? Now this is where we need to bring other organizations. In our case, we brought conservation organizations like the Nature Conservance, the Frankfurt Zoological Society, the Jane Goodall Institute, so that they are able to support things which Pathfinder cannot do, because we are not the experts in livelihood, we are not experts in fisheries. But then we need to look what are those other non-governmental organizations which are supporting the education sector. Who are those organizations doing food security and nutrition? Then all of those are key important stakeholders to support now the government and to support the communities in putting efforts to address the challenges and come with a sustainable solution.
Thank you, Josaphat. Yes, you know, building on Andrea's point of strategic partnerships, I think you've really clearly outlined how we should be working with different levels of government, with different kinds of organizations in civil society. And of course, at the center should be our beneficiaries, going back to Metsehate's point. Metsehate, would you add any other stakeholders based on your experience in Ethiopia? Are there others we should be paying attention to bring into our multi-sectoral partnerships?
Thank you so much, Sia. I believe everything is covered already, but maybe as a way of indirectly answering your question, what I can say is, considering the diversity of the adolescents and young people, and I would say which sector to put in might differ based on the situation and condition of adolescents and young people themselves. For instance, some of them are in school, out of school, some of them are in a safe place, and others are in an unsafe, unsecured place to the extent of being in IDPs. So the needs and priorities for all those are different. And when the programs are designed from their perspective, having them at the center, I am sure the list of sectors who's going to address their issues is going to come clear. And I don't believe that it's a standard or a checklist, because context really varies from place to place. That's what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Metsehate. Yes, that very important reminder that each context is completely different. And I do think when you think about the different players in each context, you're right that they will sort of identify the issues along with the beneficiaries. Andrea, in your work with youth and workforce development, I'm wondering, there's one stakeholder that has not been mentioned yet, and that's the private sector. And I'm wondering if that is also a partner that we should be thinking about for multi-sectoral programming, for adolescent and youth programming.
Thank you, Sia. Well, I do believe it is important to involve the private sector, the employers. They might give you some hints and some support to put your the important topic of sexual and reproductive health in the agenda of some other stakeholders that you want to bring with you. In our experience, for example, employers, the private sector, not only can give you this last support of providing youth with opportunities to work in their companies, but also they can help you justifying the case or making the case of why having a holistic programming in specifically with sexual and reproductive health, it's important. Some of them have challenges in hiring young people, and some of them might be interested in providing employment opportunities for young women, for example, because of their social responsibility interests. And they might, or they have challenges on hiring them because the young people do not get to their doors. And why is that? It's because X and Y and all of the issues that we know from young people, right? So they can make you do the case, build a strong case, so you have a justification of why it is important to provide better services in the programming that you are designing.
Thank you. I think you've all made an extremely strong case for why multi-sectoral programming is important and necessary for adolescent and youth programming. I'd like to turn now to some of the challenges of how we actually do that. And we have a question about whether are there theories of behavior change that can inform multi-sectoral program? And how are we actually capturing knowledge learned through implementation? So I'd like to pass that question to Josaphat.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so in our integrated programming, behavior change is a key aspect, especially in the population health and environment programming we're doing in Pathfinder, because much of what is needed to get those SRH outcomes, either for the women or for youth and adolescents, there is a lot to do with behavior change communication. So that is very key to achieving the outcomes, especially when it comes to multi-sectoral programming. Now, in addition to that, we need to gather learning from time to time. and that learning need to be informed by the monitoring and evaluation plan, which is normally designed jointly during the design phase. So what are those key outcomes we all aspire to see that this is a success? What are those key indicators? And they need to be shared by all the organizations which are doing the joint implementation. Now, from time to time, what we normally do in our programs here in the East Africa is like after every end of the year, we normally have to meet together with the community members, with the government stakeholders to analyze what are we learning, what are the key outcomes we see out there. Are there some new emerging challenges, and how do we address those challenges? Then we normally do a periodic joint review, like after every 3 years. We call like a mid-review, where we go back to our theory of change, our indicators. Are we seeing changes? For example, a few years ago, we conducted a midterm review. We are trying to look on a number of indicators. So for conservation indicators, things we are doing very well. For health indicators, things we are doing very well. For example, the knowledge and uptake of family planning among the youth was improving. But there was an indicator on the desired family size that is stagnated over the 6 years. So we were saying, okay, what's the problem here? What do we need to do? Now, as we tried to dig into the data, we found actually majority of the people who still aspire to have a family of over 7 children were actually the parents who were of the age above 40, 45. Now, based on this, what do we do? So we decided to focus much of our interventions on the youth, because if we change the mindset of the youth, then we are able to get more SRH outcomes in some years. So we then had to sit down with all the stakeholders, then we came up with a youth engagement strategy, which we still use. So that is how we normally gather the lessons, where we see the challenges, we sit together again, jointly agree what are the next steps.
Thank you, Josaphat, and thank you for putting the spotlight on sort of behavior change and how actually we are all learning as we go through and design and implement these programs. Andrea, I'd like to come back to what you talked about with systems thinking, and just wondering if you could share some of the theories around systems thinking that have informed your work.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sia. Well, at IYF, we have systems change is one of our main focus in our work. So we usually begin in our program design by having this approach. We try not to start thinking about solutions until we have a map of the systems that are around our population that we want to work with. So in this case, it's not a simple process. We start with it at the beginning of our program design, and then we keep with it during the program implementation, during the evaluation phases, the closeout phases of the program. We need to identify who are these players that are in each of the sectors that we are working in. What are their incentives, for example? What do they want? In what language do we need to speak to them? And I'm not talking about Spanish or English or whatever. It means that we need to also learn as an organization other forms of speaking to our audience, to who we want to get involved with in the programming. So this is basically what we do at IYF. Is in our nature, and this has given us the opportunity to not only tackle a specific issue, in our case mainly employability, but also to look at different actors that might be there that are not in our own sector, but that might be super strategic to get involved with us, so we can better provide better outcomes and better results for better services for our young people.
That makes a lot of sense. Andrea, I'm curious if you could share maybe the most surprising stakeholder who's joined one of your initiatives, sort of someone, a sector or a player that you didn't expect to join your initiative once you did that broader systems analysis.
Well, I would say maybe it's a rough question. I haven't thought about who it might be, but maybe the industrial clusters sometimes. You know, these are actors that are kind of, well, as I saw in one of the comments, they are for profit, right? So what will their interest be in getting involved with an NGO with ourselves, right? And so it is very interesting working with them and seeing that they have an honest interest in supporting young people to get better opportunities, not only in terms of education and employment, but also in tackling these challenges related to sexual and reproductive health. Because if they are involved in, as I said before, in helping us building our case, they will be supporting not only their companies by having young people better prepared or better prepared on joining them, but also the whole community will be benefited by the things that they are doing.
Thank you. Yes, I remember when I was involved in programming around adolescent girls' health and education, we soon realized, and it did take us by surprise, that we needed to engage the public transport sector, because that's how girls were accessing our services. And I always feel like those surprises can be the most fruitful partnerships once everybody gets on board and sort of has that shared vision. Josaphat mentioned evaluation and really putting in place sort of jointly identified outcomes. And Metsehate, I was wondering if you could speak to how do we actually evaluate the partnerships between sectors and how we're doing as different sectors coming together, getting used to working together, finding our shared visions. What are the ways we can hold ourselves accountable as partners?
Thank you so much, Sia, and apology for not being on video. It's just to save my connection. So for me, for the multi-sectoral approach to better work, there must be a strong coordination mechanism. And that a strong coordination mechanism should be supported enough with clear lines of roles and responsibilities. And it should have also a strong accountability framework in it. Otherwise, oftentimes that coordination, that coming together, culture of working together is not appreciated by many, because most of us are, you know, having this expertise bias, always thinking about our sector, you know, to the extent of maybe bragging about our own sector and its capability to solve the problems of humanity. But that's not the case, to be honest. So for that to tone down and understand, value each other, we need to know our role in that collaboration and in that joint effort. And at the same time, we need to be set accountable. That way of making us accountable can be done in lots of different ways. Formal evaluations, agreeing on indicators could be one of doing it, which is a little bit resource intensive. But at the same time, we can set accountable among ourselves as long as the indicator is clear, as long as the value add even to our sector is very clear. I remember one of the speakers mentioned what is the incentive for, I think it's Andrea, what's the incentive for the private sector, for instance, to invest on adolescent use SRH? For a multi-sectoral approach to work, the incentive for those respective sectors should be clear enough in a very tangible and measurable way. That is the problem I see when we are designing integrated programming and when we are working in this cross-cutting issues such as meaningful use engagement, multi-sectoral approach. We agree in principle, but when it comes to the how to do it, how to measure it, how to justify ourselves so that the approach is right to address our issues within a short period of time, within a limited resource, that's where the issue comes. So I believe data is very, very important, and it should be measured on a regular basis using different approaches. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Metsehate. Yes, I love your focus on clear roles and responsibilities and holding ourselves and each other accountable. Josaphat, I wanted to come back to you. You mentioned designing jointly in relation to evaluation, and I wanted to ask the question of whether you think joint implementation is necessary in multi-sectoral programming, or whether we should just be doing joint planning and then each going out and doing our part. What have you found works best in your experience?
Yeah, fortunately, I have worked in different scenarios where we plan together, but everyone deliver on their own, and in situations where we plan together and implement together. So implementing together has a number of benefits. This is also context based. In our scenarios, we work in very remote communities, and anytime we go, then we have colleagues from each sector, including those from the departments of the government. So we go together. So we go to a village. We have the health people doing the health work, conservation people doing the conservation work. In that way, we actually rationalize the use of resources. We use joint transport, so we save fuel than each of the partners going on their own. Fuel is very costly through the lake. But when you go, as we were saying, the needs are connected to each other. So when you go to a community, we talk to the young people about the agriculture and the engagement in food security. Then we have a medical doctor who will be there talking to them how that is also connected to their health and how that contributes to SRH outcomes. Then we have an added advantage. That is one key. Joint implementation has more benefits than a parallel implementation. For the parallel implementation is the use of resources is not very wise. You go to the same village, you are meeting the very same people, but you go at different times, and those people have other responsibilities. So you use that burden by going together. But the other thing is, if that relationship has not been nurtured very well and is not strong enough, you end up having people going to do conservation work without talking anything about the health, or you end up having people in health who will not talk anything about the fisheries. But the joint implementation, then you build that culture of every person understanding the work of the other person, such that in the event where the other person is not around, you are a health person, but you should be able to talk about the fisheries, should be able to talk about the terrestrial ecosystem. Yeah, so that is, I've been part of both partnerships, and I see more value for the joint implementation.
Thank you, Josaphat. It's wonderful to hear about how the joint implementation it both increases efficiencies and sort of strategic goals of creating a truly multi-sectoral approach. We are coming up to 5 minutes to the hour. It's never enough time, I'm finding. But many, many thanks to our 3 speakers. You've raised such important issues that are relevant to adolescent and youth reproductive health programming for us to consider, really highlighting the value and importance of strategic partnership, mapping out systems and understanding how the different pieces fit together, finding out what are those incentives that can lead to a shared and joint vision that, as Josaphat has highlighted, can lead to efficient and strategic joint implementation. Andrea, your expertise in youth development has put the spotlight on how we don't all have to be experts on sexual and reproductive health, but we know when we are working with young people, it is going to come up and we need to be ready to respond. And I just want to end this session by going back to one of the first things that Metsehate said, which is that we need to listen to the young people and put them at the center of our programs. And when we do that, we learn that we should be approaching these issues, as you've all said, in a holistic way, because that's the way their lives play out and that's the way we can best serve them. So thank you, Andrea, Josaphat, and Metsehate for your wonderful insights. Thank you to the audience for all the incredible questions you've shared. Thank you to Knowledge Success and FP2030 for hosting this amazing series of connecting conversations. It's been such a privilege to be here with all of you. Back to you, Brittany. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. Thank you, everyone, for your engaged and thoughtful discussion. And I'd like to thank our moderator, Sia, as well as our speakers for joining us today. And as Sia mentioned, all of you for your great questions. We'll be posting and sending out a recording of today's session as well. And we hope you'll join us for our next conversation on November 11th at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we'll explore scaling up AYSRH programs. And we also encourage you to follow FP2030 and Knowledge Success to stay updated on resources, activities, and future events. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you all for such a great conversation, and we'll see you soon on November 11th.